We've talked so far about realities of change, different factors that happen along the way. And one of the ways that I think we can, as leaders, whether we're paid or not paid, it doesn't matter, as leaders in our community, one of the key ways by which to help change move forward effectively is by developing trust. Now, are you in the back of the room able to see the smaller print?
Yes.
Is that it? Are those, you're able to see all of this? Yes. So what I'm going to ask you to do, these are called, by the way, the ABCDs of trust.
Yes.
It's the research of Ken Blanchard and some of his associates. Cynthia Alstead, I believe, is one of them. Also can be found in the book that's coming out that I prepared. But either way, I'm going to ask you to rank these four qualities in terms of which one you think has the greatest impact on trust between leader and the rank and file, so to speak. Is it able, defined as their basic competence? Is it believable, the idea that they act with integrity? Is it care and connection? Or is it dependability and reliability? I'm going to ask you to rank them from 1 to 4. I don't really care. We could say that 1 is most integral for trust, okay, or most critical. So take a moment to do that. Just curious about your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. Based off of this, how many of you chose able as the most important element of trust? Your actual ability. Okay, how many chose believable? Okay. How many chose, I'm trying to keep the numbers in my head. How many chose connected? And how many chose dependable? Interesting. So the last 3 roughly came out to be about the same. The first one I think got 0 responses. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Because if you interview somebody to be your head of school, head of agency, head of organization, whatever it might be, aren't you usually looking for ability first and foremost? In most cases, right? Of course we ask the questions, how is their relationships and stuff like that, but we don't necessarily prioritize those areas. But in reality, ability takes, now to me that's actually consistent with what we looked at before. Right? I think that's pretty consistent with what we said over here with Maxwell. The idea, oh, I went too far, somehow that slide didn't show up when I went backwards, but here it is. The idea that people don't necessarily buy into the vision, the ability may not be great, but the other stuff is pretty strong, get another vision. Meaning to say, we'll continue to support you until you get it right. But if you have the ability, we buy into the concept, but we don't connect with you as a leader, then get another leader. Now, I don't want to keep making this about the professionals in the room. That's not what I'm saying. Everybody here is a leader. You're all leaders in whatever you do, both personally, professionally, as well as communally. So you're all in the same boat in this regard. But isn't it interesting that we're less interested in the ability of the individual as we are in their ability to connect with us, to be believable and dependable and really connected. So I just thought that that's something for us to consider.
So I think it parallels even in the business world. You're hiring a person. The skills can be learned, but you want the quality person first.
And you're seeing companies making that decision more and more. They're emphasizing. I remember seeing a video with Steve Jobs when he was younger. You know, the olden days of Apple Computer, whatever it was called back then, Macintosh. I forget exactly what the evolution of the company was, but he talked about how they would invite people and spend a whole day with them and really try to get to know them. And then, you know, I think their technical skills were secondary. And that was, I think, cutting edge thinking at the time. I don't think corporate America was quite there then, in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. But eventually, I think more and more, especially with many more companies being founded by millennials, the younger, the Gen Y or Gen Z even, people who are, you know, younger and have a tendency to think more about the relationship and the culture and ultimately how does it make me feel more so than what is the profit that it's going to line in my bank account. Though I did see other research also that I haven't included in the book about 2 groups. I can't recall where exactly these groups were found, but one group chose the profession I'm trying to remember exactly what it was now. One group chose the profession based off of what was typically, I guess, considered to be more in line with making profit, and others just chose what they were passionate about and sort of saw the profit as the back end. And of the group, of the millionaires, however many there were in the group, a very high percentage, 90+% of the group, were the millionaires who had chosen passion prior to what they thought was just the easy or direct way to profit. So it's just something to think about, that when you really love what you do, and that comes through in your job, that ultimately drives people forward.
Where would passion fall in one of those qualities?
I don't know if passion is a trust element per se, maybe that's why it's not here, but I think that passion may be about connection. Probably, that was, to me, that's the most logical place to put it. But yeah, I think passion is critical too. Okay, so I wanted you to see that. Now I think we're officially aligned with where we are the second part of our presentation. Okay, great. Now, so with that in mind, so these are just some ideas, good practices. By the way, for those of you who did not notice, another page was left for you during the break. This was part of the original handout but didn't make it into your packet. So you can sort of neatly slip it in under, it really is like the back of this page. Right? In other words, your first page is two-sided. This page is only one-sided, the one that has the circle on it. That's, I guess you call it page 3, remember? No, it should have been. Okay, and this one, which was found on your paper, which was found on your desk, is page 4. Okay? Sort of just keeping that in mind. All right? So we're in the bottom of side 1, so you can see I'm now shifting into the mode which teachers typically do in a 40-minute period when they hit like minute 37. And they know they've got like 20 minutes worth of content and 3 minutes yet to teach it. So I'm going to pick up a little bit on pace. I'm not going to try to speed through everything. And if ultimately we leave a couple of things to the side, so be it. We didn't start with the usual amount of time that I typically have. So we're going to do the best we can. But I don't want to sacrifice quality just to say that we covered, so to speak, the entire breadth of what I included in your packet. So, and Steve Jobs, I mentioned him just a moment ago. There are others as well. You might be familiar with a book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Thank you. You're familiar with it. Okay? Read it if you haven't already. The character who becomes the new leader, Catherine, I think is her name, she spends time observing before she does anything. Bill Gates was, not Bill Gates, Steve Jobs is the same way in round 2 when he returned to Apple. Spent time observing before he came to everybody and said, this is what we're going to do. It's critical to observe, to understand really what's going on. Ask lots of questions. Understand what people are thinking. Why are we doing what we're doing? But obviously not in a way that's confrontational. There are ways you could ask questions. You could sound like a nudnik, if I could use the Yiddish, if it is Yiddish. I think it is. And you can also ask questions in a way that can sound accusatory. And so that's really important. I'm really bad at that. Oftentimes my questions, in coaching, I've gotten so much better. What do you think about? Or, would you consider? Things like that are a little bit less sort of pointed in the questioning. But the key thing is to try to understand. As Stephen Covey would often say, seek to understand before being understood. And that's it's one of the 7 habits that he lists in his very famous book, okay, of blessed memory. Identify opportunities. Once you've collected some information, now you can start to think about where do we have opportunity to grow. And sometimes you would just want to use the initial changes we talked about before to build some small wins, gain some momentum, and also to feel out the process in a low temperature environment. Right? Because we know that when major change is required, the temperature rises invariably. Sometimes you have no choice. You come into a situation, the books are all messed up, the finances are really in trouble, other problems exist. It's what we call a turnaround situation. You don't have a choice. Right? But in most cases, if you have that runway, give yourself the benefit of going slowly, identifying opportunities, and also to try to analyze who your players are. And try to spend some time with them to figure out what they're thinking and how squarely behind your initiatives are they. So you have that on your packet. That's now on side 2. Okay? And you also have to realize, your stakeholders, they carry different levels of weight. There are some people whose influence is greater and people whose influence is less significant. You've got people whose interest is less, people whose interest is more. Okay? So invariably, the people who are here are the most important ones, the key players. They're the people who you really need to ensure get behind you as much as you possibly can to gain their support and their trust. Okay? There are people who are influential but not so interested. Just make sure at least you want to try to increase their levels of interest. You want to push them over here if you can. That would be your ideal. So you're thinking about the change, you're also thinking about the players and the individuals. And it may look something like this. Okay? So these might be some of your key stakeholders over here. This might be what we want to be the minimum commitment required. We call it 0. And X would be where they are right now. Okay? So this individual over here is totally fine, this one as well. And you'll notice that you've got different I'm doing this obviously quickly, but I want to just give you a feel. Opposed means they're in opposition to your endeavor. This is more of a passive position. Helping it happen, they're going to facilitate, and these are the real, the real drivers, the ones who are going to make it happen. Okay? So you might only need 1 or 2 people to be in this area over here. You might need more. I'm just using this as a sample. Ideally, you want everybody at least to be over here. Okay? However, in some instances, you may have to push some people along to get them to where they need to be. And that's going to be conversation that you're going to have. That's going to be showing them the benefits. And of course, helping them to see it from their perspective as much as you can. Really, as far as I'm concerned, just my experience and my study, and you can verify if you agree with this or not, so much of leading effective change is not the actual change, but it's in sowing the seeds of change. It's in establishing and building the foundation of change. Because once you've got everybody behind you, you've got that momentum, the change will almost happen automatically if, of course, you know where you want to go, because you've got so many people behind you pushing it along to success. It's where you've got people who are in opposition mode, who are undermining you at every turn. That's where, more often than not, or they just never felt that you took the time to bring them in. They never felt that you took the time to explain why this was important, or how this was going to happen, or what the impact was going to be to me in particular. I want to know about me, right? Me, the rank and file. I want to know how this is going to impact me. And if I haven't taken the time to make that clear, ultimately, I think people, even if they see the benefit, are going to, on some level, be resistant, even if the resistance is just being over here. Right? You do it, go right ahead, I'm going to let it happen, I'm not going to oppose it, because I don't think that's good for me to oppose it. It's politically not correct, it might get me into trouble, but I'm not necessarily going to get behind it. And the more you can get people behind it to push it forward, usually the more successful we'll be. Yes, ma'am?
So if you have a situation where misconceptions may have occurred, how do you, and someone remains opposed, how do you get them to at least go toward the other side? Yeah.
So again, I think a personal conversation could be very helpful. Take them out to, over a cup of coffee.
If they don't, but if they're not admitting it to you, you're hearing from other people saying.
Well, I think you could still say to them, there's rumors circulating that you're not really with us, and I just want to take the time, if I can, to clarify what your position is and to explain, where we're going with it as best as possible. I mean, I will tell you, sometimes you build such a positive momentum that others will do it for you. I remember very distinctly, we had, I might have mentioned this in my last presentation, I can't recall. There's a program called PBIS, which is a national program that relates to student comportment, positive behaviors, instruments, and supports, and you'll find it basically in every state in the union. And it's a great system that I found it to be a great system because it's values-based. And what it basically says is these are the values of our institution, and these are the applications of such values in different contexts. So for example, you embrace the value of respect. So what does respect look like in a classroom? What does it look like on the school bus? What does it look like in the lunchroom? What does it look like in non-structured environments at the park, et cetera, et cetera? And therefore, once you have embraced those, we actually made a Jewish connection. We called it the Sefer program to tie into the idea of Sefer Torah, of a Torah scroll. And SFRR was the acronym, It had no verb, it had no vowels, but it had those 4 consonants. Safe, friendly, respectful, and responsible. Those were our 4. And it's spelled safer, so we had a little cartoonish character of a Sefer Torah, teaching the values. It was very cute. But it really captured the essence once you had everybody on board. So I had one teacher, actually a Judaic studies teacher, that just didn't see the importance of this. And he was sort of a belligerent fellow. And, would pipe up when you really didn't want him to. Does anyone have that experience? At a board meeting or something? Sort of like a little on the ornery side, not really as socially astute as you'd like for him to be, this kind of thing. And he pipes up and he says, I don't know what... Now, and I will tell you, the first meeting that we had about this took place around Purim time in March. We're now in the following year, 2nd or 3rd faculty meeting. So it's like October, all right? And he's still piping up with the opposition. So a female colleague, one of the other teachers, who typically was a very non-participant, participatory type individual, participative, if that's even a word, in our meetings, she turns to him and she goes, Rabbi, we already discussed it. We already agreed to it. Let's move on. And so I had a moment there where I was like, oh, thank you. I was in my Baruch Hashem moment, exactly. Thank God. Because I was going to be another one of those moments where I'm going to have to deal with ornery fellow over here and take equity out of my account and all this kind of stuff and deal with it. It's never comfortable. Even if you do it well, it's never comfortable. And then when she handled it for me, I'm like, dude, this is cool. I'm moving on, right? And we did, and that was what it was. Okay? So, now that you've got everybody behind you, let's talk practically. Okay? Where you can, obviously, you can't take on the whole change element by yourself. You're going to need to be able to delegate. We'll talk more about delegation in just a moment. Okay? And how you do it. I actually do a whole different seminar on delegation because it's really a process. Right? Oftentimes we think, what's the big deal? I'll just punt it off to somebody. But how often do we see professionals that have desks with stacks of paper yay high because they're not able, willing, whatever, to delegate? It's not so simple all the time. And we've all experienced it, so we don't want to look at any direction in our room here. I'm as guilty as anyone else. Go look at my desk at home, you'll see it. Okay? The only thing is, when you work for yourself, you really don't have anyone to delegate to, except for your left hand. All right, different conversation. All right? And the other piece of it, of course, is to communicate. Because when you're communicating effectively, consistently, people know what's going on. They know what's happening, when it's going to happen, what's my role in all of this. We don't like surprises. Right? Contrary to what they tell you about birthday parties, people don't like surprises. All right? And when they don't know, as we'll see a little bit later, they fill in the void. And when they fill in the void, it's usually not with the same rose-eyed optimism that many of us had earlier. It's with dread. It's with fear. It's with what's really coming. And we've all experienced that. We know what that feels like. Okay? Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to say sometimes also with delegation, one of the benefits of that is when you give people authority, it gives them ownership, which gives them buy-in.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So delegating authority is a great thing.
Right. Actually, it's part of our tradition as well. The Hebrew word ahava, which means love, is connected to the word hav, which means to give. We often think that love is sort of like this instantaneous thing, like Hollywood, presents it. It's like this magical thing, potion stuff that happens across a room, or we say we love steak, or we love pizza, or things like that. But the reality is, if we loved it, you wouldn't eat it, right? So true love is something much deeper. But the reason that you love something and become committed to it is because you've given to it. And when you give somebody the opportunity to give, to invest themselves in a process. I'm actually listening to it, like I'm listening in my car. It's called Audible. You might be familiar with Amazon. So it's like books on tape. And I'm listening to Jeff Walker, who happens to be a marketing guru. And he talks about that when you do your launches for products and all sorts of things, give people, before you launch, an opportunity to comment, an opportunity to make suggestions, an opportunity to be part of your process. The more people feel part of your process, to your point, the more they ultimately will feel that they are invested and that it's going to be successful. Because when I make a choice, research is very clear on this, when I make a choice about something, we're going to defend that choice much longer. So for example, if you make a choice about which synagogue to pray in, or which school to send your children to, or which baseball team to follow, right? Or anything like this, and then things don't go the way you initially envisioned, you're going to stay with it much longer than if you were looking at it for the first time. You know, Brian Tracy has this idea of, I think he calls it QUINK, knowing what I now know, which, by the way, is a very powerful idea, because whenever you're in a situation of problems, right, oftentimes, somebody mentioned it before, I think one of the gentlemen here talked about the human side. I think you talked about this, of organization, non-for-profits. There's a lot, I thought you were going to go in a little bit of a different direction. The idea of, in a non-for-profit, we're typically we're more humane in many ways than in a for-profit. A for-profit, to the point that was mentioned before, is about, ultimately it's about the bottom line. It really is. In a non-for-profit, we tend to, and you see that with schools, why don't they just fire that teacher? Why don't they just get rid of that person in a non-for-profit? The answer is because it has a different culture. And that's not a bad thing necessarily at all. But at the same time, we have to be able to say to ourselves, knowing what I know now, if I had to make the decision again, what would my decision be? And sometimes we have to be able to cut the line and say, you know what? We did it in good faith. It was the right kind of thing at the time, but ultimately it didn't pan out. We have to move on. And that's also part of change. So there's a lot of play here, and that's why it gets a little complicated, because we have careers at stake, but a lot of things oftentimes at play. And we have to be mindful of that. So here's something for you to look at when it comes to delegation. I could spend an hour on this slide, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to do so. Just take a look for a moment. And you have, I think Wendy has all the slides. I think I sent them to you as slides. So they can be made available later. You'll notice over here, if you've ever read Ken Blanchard's 1 Minute Manager, you'll know what this is intuitively. If you haven't, get your hands on it, because there's a lot for all of us. And it's not big, it's not thick, it's not a large book, it's easy read, and it's narrative based. So it reads like a dialogue, like a story. So it's really an easy pickup for anybody. Anyway, you'll notice delegation is only in quadrant 4. Delegation is only in quadrant 4. High competence. You'll notice the colors correspond. So green here corresponds to green here. High competence and high commitment, that's where you delegate. Because that time, low direction and low support is required. So true delegation is where you're giving it over to somebody because they have the tools and the energy and the attitude and all of the factors necessary to get the job done basically without you. That's what real delegation is. Anything less than that is on the directing, coaching, supporting continuum. And there you're dealing with people, the way that they describe it is that they're very motivated at the beginning. So you don't need to support them that much, but they need a lot of direction. Over time, their motivation falls by the wayside, and now you've got the worst of both. The motivation has dropped, and they still haven't built the aptitude and the efficacy and the skill. So they're over here, they need some coaching. They need high direction, but they also need a lot of support. As you move forward, the level of direction diminishes because they've gotten better at it, but you still need to support them. And then finally you get to the level where they're so competent that they're providing their own juice. They're supporting themselves because they have that initiative and they have that desire. So really, your ideal delegation candidate is an S4. Anyone less than S4 is going to need more of your time, more of your support. But at the end of the day, and again, this is really a bigger conversation, if you invest in those people on the front end, you spend a lot of time with them, eventually it'll pay itself back many times over in the amount that they're able to accomplish for you and for your organization. So, as we circle back to this slide for a moment, when you advance the agenda, where you can, find other people to help you. Make sure that you're communicating effectively. And then as we talk about implementation, I'm just going to put, actually I can't put them all up at once, so I'll just go them one by one. But now, just to get caught up to where we are in the paper, we should now find ourselves on side 3. Okay? And you'll see number 8. This slide corresponds with number 8. Okay? So I hope I haven't lost you at any point. If I have, you can certainly let me know. Where you can, you want to proceed slowly. As we talked about, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And in most cases, as Cotter discussed, the critical elements are that you are giving it enough time and you're providing enough support along the way. And you're communicating effectively all the way through. Keeping in mind that even if it's intuitive and obvious and easy for you, For many of your people, it's not. And so as the person leading the process, whoever the leaders are in the room, you want to just be mindful of the fact that many others are coming along with you for the ride, and you need to make sure that you're bringing them with you. Otherwise, you'll be like me in an airport where you're sort of like darting off the plane and you leave your family all the way behind, schlepping their luggage, and have to turn around 26 times. Where is everybody, right? So you don't want to be that guy, if you know what I mean. Okay, and if anyone else is like that, we can have a support group conversation afterwards, if you'd like. But anyway, right, you want to give people opportunities to learn. Educating them is critical. Build their efficacy. Give them knowledge, and that could be through workshops, that could be through webinars, that could be through books, it could be through team meetings and conversation. But people need to be able to learn. If you don't give them the tools, how can you expect them to do it? And how can you expect them to be motivated to do it? So that's a critical element as well. Any change that requires learning, that has to be factored in monetarily, budgetarily. It has to be factored in terms of your time. It has to be factored in terms of your players. Who are they that you're going to seek to educate to ensure that they can handle this element for you? Okay? Check in regularly with all parties. How are we doing? Surveys could be useful here. I don't know what your survey response rate is, but you could have informal dialogue, right? Don't just do a beginning and an end, but schedule regularly that you're going to check in with your people that are affected by the changes that you're discussing and get some feedback from them. And based on the feedback that you get, you then can go ahead and assess your progress. You could reinforce the good things that are happening. Sorry, I think there's one that I wanted to see there, which is to make adjustments as needed, right? Sometimes you're going to have plan A for your change, but then along the way you're going to realize that you can't sustain plan A all the way through. Something has to change. And if you go into it with a clear picture that's going to guide you, but enough inner flexibility and confidence that you're doing the right thing, you'll be able and willing to adjust on the fly. Right? Because sometimes your best laid plans at the beginning are really not the best plans. You thought they were the best plans when you started, but once you got started, you saw the realities on the ground. You've all been, everybody here has been part of a change, and it doesn't have to be a big change process. Even little things around your house, etc. You plan X ultimately is not the greatest idea, and you shift to Y. But you're doing that because of the feedback that you're getting. So where there's progress, you want to reinforce it, and when there's not, you want to decide how to handle that. You bring the process back, whatever it might ultimately be. But the more that you've given your people a chance to work through it with you, give you feedback, learn along the way, take ownership and responsibility, all of those things are going to be helpful. And I think the next slide really captures the cycle very nicely. So I know in the back it may be a little bit hard to see. I'll read it to you starting at 12 o'clock. Visioning and detailed planning, I think this is really where it begins. Strong support, we talked about this idea, building support with your stakeholders. Continuous and varied communication, making sure that you're constantly bringing the message along. And I would make the communication not just, here's what we're doing, but make it the kind of communication that excites people. The kind of communication that gets people optimistic and thinking, this is really happening. We're really making progress. Look at what's, bring in a testimonial, bring in a little case study snippet, something along the lines of, we're measuring progress, we're actually getting places. And to get people more and more excited as you move forward with it. Assessment to gauge your successful milestones, and of course, wherever you have challenges. Trainings and other activities that are going to help people become more educated. Reinforcement, and this is very important. This is important with any type of change, any type of learning for that matter. You can't do a one and done. It never works, right? And I'll say it about this workshop as well. Any workshop, any training, any speech, anything. If all you do is listen to somebody, hopefully somewhat entertaining for a period of time, and they share good information with you, and then you put it neatly on a shelf and never go back to it, it's not going to be very valuable to you. But if, for example, you take a few minutes at your next board meeting, whether that's a federation meeting or whether that's an individual agencies, and you take a little bit of time to talk about recent learning, whether it's about tonight's learning or other learning, discussing it, giving people opportunities to apply it in your specific culture and environment and with your own specific situation that you're grappling with. last time we talked about this. What would be some relevant applications? Of course, you want to think about it. The leadership, whoever's organizing the meeting, whoever's setting the agenda for the meeting, is going to want to think about that strategically beforehand. But nonetheless, when you bring everybody together, you now give them an opportunity to take it, deepen it, and apply it. And that's really critical. Take it from me, I'm an educator. That one thing I can tell you, not much else, but learning doesn't happen unless it's applied. And the best way to learn it is to teach it. The best way to learn it, research is very clear on this. The more active you are in the learning, the more you do to reinforce it and then actually to teach it to somebody else. Have a brief conversation with somebody about it. Even if you set up a phone conversation with somebody sitting next to you, and tomorrow you pick up the phone for 5 minutes, what did you think were the three most important things you learned last night? And you did that with somebody else, you're going to take away much more than if you just sat here and participated, even though you're doing a great job, But even so, it's different when you own it on your own. And you do it a little bit afterwards, after your brain has had a process to think about it and process. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm only letting you get away with it because you're adults. Otherwise, if it was my classroom, I'd check for understanding. But I know you're good. So we're moving on. Okay? Now, I'm going to skip this. Let's go right here. I think this is this will be our last area of focus. We only have a few minutes at this point. I do want to leave a little bit of time remaining for wrap-up and questions and all. But I wanted to introduce you to this formula because you'll see here different elements that are really important. And you'll notice I never verified that this is a true multiplication sign, meaning to say that they multiply one to the other, but I'm going to assume that it is. You have to have these three factors working together to overcome this one factor. Okay? So dissatisfaction, we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means exactly. Taking advantage of the current level of dissatisfaction, which is always the driver for change. Unless it's just, let's call it market realities and things like that. That also drives change. But usually it's some level of dissatisfaction with where we are. It's compounded by the vision that you create of what you want to become. It's then enhanced by the first steps that you take to build momentum. All of that has to be stronger than resistance. And at this point, we should find ourselves on the page that was handed to you at the break. Okay, this last one over here, sorry, this one over here. Okay, you'll see it at the top there. Let's go through them one by one. So dissatisfaction with the status quo. What you have over here, if time would permit, I'd love to do it with you, but you have it in front of you, and you can do it really at any time, maybe at a board meeting if you wanted to. Right over here, in the middle of the page. This is something that I picked up from a consultant online. I think her name is Deborah Macklin. I always like to quote people where I can. And I saw it on one of her posts. I thought it was brilliant. It's called Making a Case for Change. And the case for change, you're basically saying, right, what is it that we want? Why do we want it? And what's going to happen if we don't do it? So you see it over here on this slide. Okay? So you'll notice it's, what's the background? Like what's prompting this? What's driving this? You have it on your paper. What challenges or problems do we face that we need to address? Right? Our annual campaign, less engagement, reduction in participation or in participants or members or whatever those issues are. What's driving change in demographics in our community, et cetera, et cetera. And what's going to happen if we don't do anything about it? If we stay the same and nothing changes, what's going to happen?
It's going to fail.
Make honest projections for yourself, whatever it is. You know your community and you know your organization, you know the answers. Or at least you will put it out there for conversation. Now what do we have to let go of in order to be able to move forward? What are the sacred cows that we might not be able to continue to maintain? And what are the processes and procedures and ways of doing things that are no longer relevant in the year 2017? That might have been relevant when the organization was founded in 1977, 40 years ago, or however long it is. Okay? What will the change require in cost and in other? And by the way, the other can often be more expensive than the actual dollars. Right? The change in equity, what will it cost in terms of people not liking our direction and choosing to opt out? What are the risks here? And then finally, what will success look like? These are hard questions. This is not a 5-minute exercise. But it is an exercise that can be extremely valuable to you when you look at what it is that you really want to do. You have to say to yourself, but if I don't answer this question over here and over here, if I don't look at 2 and 3, I'm not going to ever get the momentum, the motivation. We all know when change happens. Change happens when we're in deep trouble, in many cases. Sometimes we rush to change, and that's what we talk about getting into trouble because we go too fast. But ultimately, there's always a motivator. People don't change just because, I mean, we might change our necktie, we might change our shoes, you know, that kind of thing will change, because we don't want to look the same every day. But in terms of organizational structure, we're not looking for change unless there's a driver. So the driver has to be compelling. The driver is what's going to sustain it. But you still have to have a plan behind it. You can't just change into nothingness. You have to change into a clearly defined direction. Okay? So now that we know that change is necessary, what is the vision of the new reality? Let's get it as crystal clear as we can. The more adjectives, the more descriptors, the more that we can sort of envision it in our mind's eye, the more you'll actually subconsciously, there's a lot of research about this, that subconsciously you will be, well, people talk about this, Tony Robbins and others, the idea that if you envision yourself financially and otherwise living a different life, a more purposeful life, a more financially free life, a life where you have more time to yourself and your family, whatever drives you. If you have it and you create that clarity of vision, even if you don't necessarily take clear steps towards that outcome, invariably you will start to move in that direction because your brain is already looking for solutions in the subconscious level. So if you have a clear vision of what you want, even if you haven't yet taken steps to get there, you're already going to start moving people in a thought process that will move you to a better place because you have that vision, that clarity. Okay? And then, of course, you need to take action. It's all good to have conversation, but at the end of the day, without the action, you're not getting anywhere. So those are the three. And those three, compounded, need to be stronger than the fourth. And the fourth should not be underestimated because we all know that resistance is really critical. Resistance is there. It's invariable. It's going to be there. Okay? So as soon as change is introduced, people are going to get defensive. You'll see it in their body language. You'll see it in their facial expressions. You'll see it in their words. You'll see it in their communication. Some people will be more confrontational. Some people will withdraw. They'll take the exact opposite approach. And don't think that just because you're not hearing anything doesn't mean everybody is automatically satisfied. It just means they've chosen to take their conversation underground or sideways or whatever you might want to call it, whatever your metaphor might be. Okay? So there's no way to completely deal with fear. There's no way to completely deal with resistance. Change is hard. But the more that you can do, take the steps that we've discussed, and getting people prepared, getting them on board, having them have a voice, letting them hear from you on a regular basis, filling the voids, etc., all of those kinds of things will help to mitigate fear and resistance. So the opportunity might be fantastic, right? But there are a lot of people, and if you think about it, in business and in life, a lot of people had opportunity but didn't follow through, probably because fear got in the way. And we can all relate to this. We all know stories like that. Okay. I know I've been going quickly recently, and we have a few minutes left, but is there anything related to this formula in particular that anyone wanted to comment on or ask a question about? Yes? Yes.
So
I do moonlight, by the way, as an auctioneer of fine art.
Oh, I see.
So if your hand goes up just a little bit, you may have to pay for that portrait for $4,000. But go ahead, yes.
I'm just going to get these three things out right away because I don't know where you're going to go next. So the thing about what is the vision of the new reality, if you're looking for a friend to back you up, it would be Ezekiel, who's writing to the people under the deepest of slavery in Babylonia, and he's sort of telling them what the new temple is going to look like and all these things. He's putting out a vision that's so common, but it doesn't exist.
All the prophets. All the prophets. I think
Ezekiel more than any other.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, fair.
The next thing is, you didn't mention, but I wish you had, is the importance.
I still could, I got 10 minutes.
All right. It's scaffolding. The idea
Is what now?
Scaffolding.
Yeah, okay.
I remember in rabbinical school, we had to take one educational theory class.
Mhm.
It's the only thing I can remember from the class.
Okay.
So the idea that you don't want people to fall off the building, so if you want them to go from here to here in terms of your change, that may be where you want them to go ultimately, but they're gonna fall off the building, you have to be empathetic, and so that maybe they can go here, and that's worth it. And you have to put in supports so that they can get to there without falling off the building. So it's such
Okay.
a visual. And
I didn't use the same term, but we did talk about education, we did talk about giving them the tools. So we're on the same page, I think.
Yeah, I would, I hope so.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is that my wife always warned about piling. That when
Mhm.
there's so much to do, gotta do this, and this, it can often lead to not doing anything.
Right.
So that maybe if you could break down the big change into small little bits or pieces of change, and then you can have those successes you talked about, so that you know where you want to go to.
Yeah.
It's related to scaffolding. I suppose.
Right. No, it's a great point. There are quotes about this, I don't know if I have it here or not, but there is a quote that's coming to mind that I don't think is on your paper, that has to do with the idea that there are certain ways, it may even be Eisenhower who said it, that ultimately the people think that they did it themselves. If you're really good at it, if you really know how to introduce it in a way where you're sort of asking questions, introducing ideas, you're getting their minds thinking about it, that wouldn't this outcome ultimately be better? And this, by the way, could in many cases be the best, because then you mitigate the resistance too. What you do is you're getting your people to ultimately come to that decision, quote unquote, on their own. And then they think that they were the ones who were driving it from the outset. And in reality, if you go back and take a flashback to a couple of years, the environment was completely different. And you were the driving agent, but you never took credit for it. And more importantly, you kept planting seeds and sharing ideas and giving them opportunities to learn. And next thing you know, it just took off on its own. And wouldn't that be a great way to advance change? Okay, so let's review. So number one, would anyone like to take a crack at the first question? Why is it important to manage change carefully? Any thoughts there? I know that we've discussed it, but this is just an opportunity to sort of concretize and wrap up. Why does it need a management process, sort of like a thoughtful consideration of how to do it? Yes, ma'am?
If it doesn't, if you don't, it fails.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you want to succeed, you got to manage it right. So, yes.
Also to make sure that the goals along the way are being achieved so that there's like a foundation.
Yeah, and you're keeping them focused on the end product, what you want to see at the end, which is great. Thank you. What about if you don't? Besides for obviously not, you know, there's a parable I'll tell you, because did I mention the Dubna Maggid parable with the archer the last time I came? The archer in the forest. So there was a great rabbi in the 19th century known as the Dubna Maggid. A Maggid was somebody who told stories and parables that ultimately delivered a message. And he was from the town of Dubna, so he became known as the Dubna Maggid. I don't even know his real name. Anyway, so he tells of an incident where a guy goes in the forest and there are trees everywhere, and on every tree is a bullseye painted, and in every bullseye, smack in the middle of every bullseye is an arrow, flush exactly in the center of the bullseye. A bigazund. And so he's walking and he's amazed by the accuracy of the marksman who's shooting these arrows. He says, I gotta meet this guy. He asks around and he eventually is introduced to the archer. And he says, sir, how did you develop your skill to such a degree that you hit every bullseye right in the middle? He said, oh, it's simple. I shoot the arrow, I paint the bullseye around it, right? So if we don't know where we're going, we're always there, sort of like, without your GPS, we calculate it. So you obviously need to know where you're going, otherwise you're just putting in this effort, but you never know you really got there, you didn't get there. So that's obviously critical as well. Key strategies that resonated with you. If there would be one takeaway, I remember years ago, I thought that this was such a minimalist attitude, but there's a lot of wisdom in this. Somebody who used to run educational programming in Chicago for the schools that I taught for that network, he used to say that if every teacher would come out of every workshop with one practical takeaway, that it was worth it for them to spend the 2 hours or whatever it was in that particular session. I hope there's more than one. But if you only had one, what would be the one strategy that you feel either most resonated with you, can help you most in your practice? Would anyone like to answer that question? I'll give you about 30 seconds to go back and look over your notes if you'd like to, so you don't have to feel like you have to remember it all on the spot. But if there is something like that, I'd love to hear it. Number one, just my own curiosity, but number two, I think it's important for you to feel that level of connection. So let's take another 10 seconds or so, and then I'll field some responses. Ma'am, did you want to respond?
I just wanted patience.
Patience. That's a process. Yes, sir.
I thought your concept of small incremental wins is a good idea. I'm not exactly sure I really know how to do it in the planning process in reality, but the concept is very
It just means
good.
that as a leader, you're not trying to walk in with the sale of the Brooklyn Bridge. You're not trying to just like solve all the problems on day one. You build, win, you get a little bit of momentum, you've got small things that don't demand much of others, and then eventually when you come to the bigger stuff, you've already built some credibility. And it helps you then to advance more. Yes, ma'am?
Well, building on what Richard said, I like the whole build equity. I like all four of them. I think they're
Okay.
good.
Great. Yeah, that's really important. I can tell you from experience, it's really important. Yes?
So the thing that really resonated with me was the idea of positivity, and when you were looking at those four.
The trust matrix?
The trust matrix, so
Uh-huh.
what was the one called that was?
A, B, C, D. Which one?
was-
C, credible?
the-
Connected.
Yeah, the
Connected.
connected one. That really spoke to me in terms of, I think our society runs so much towards negativity, and, we're gonna have a positive comment, I'll tell you everything that you're doing wrong. And I think that it really takes a lot of energy
Yeah.
to tell people what they're doing right.
Yeah, and on top of it, if I may, I have blog posts on all sorts of stuff. I genuinely feel that in today's day and age, we have to work harder to still, I mean, the older people in the room, I hope I can say it like this, I think have less of this issue because they weren't raised with technology. But I think while technology has connected us in many ways, it also has disconnected us in terms of the depth of our relationships. And so while you're connected virtually, electronically with people, you still want to take the time to connect with them because so much research tells us so much of our communication cannot be transferred through a computer. People can't see your voice, they hear your voice, they can't see your gestures, they don't know. And there's a lot of research that says that people think that they can determine in an email, is he serious, not serious, the intent. And we often get it wrong because there's no context for the words, no context for the language. Any last points? Yes, in the back?
I really like the case for change document in terms of being able to present it to the group that you're trying to convince. And have them work through it a little bit.
Right.
You give them some guidelines, but it's a way, I think, to reduce some of the resistance because by the time they get down to number 6,
Yeah.
they're already talking about success.
Yeah, and on top of it, they're the ones who are acknowledging
doing
the
the work.
issues and doing the work. The more you get them in, right, it's easy. The easy way is come up with all the ideas. I mean, if you're just that kind of thinker, the easy thing is just do it all on your own. Come up with all the ideas, map out the plan. Nobody wants to be bothered with it, blah, blah, blah. But really, that is the long way. Because oftentimes you then have to undo a lot of the equity-related damage that you create by not creating the foundation.
It's also hard to replicate. So if you have one person doing everything,
Yeah.
that person theoretically is not going to live forever or
Right.
outlast the agency. So
Right.
you need to bring people along
Yeah.
and nurture them.
And then with succession planning and all these kinds of things,
Right.
part of it is nurturing your young leaders and giving them opportunities to grow into. And young leaders in particular, again, it's a different topic, but what they say, I hate to overgeneralize about 70 million people, but they say consistently about Gen Y is that they need to be involved. They need to have a voice. And I think the school leaders can attest to that. I think others in the room can attest to that. And so as we give as we seek, because I think that that is something on people's minds, is what I've heard in some of my conversations with individuals in this room, the idea that getting young people to feel more invested and committed to your community and all that it stands for, the only way really to do it is to find ways, it's not always easy because time is short, but find creative ways to bring the young people in and give them an opportunity and a voice to share what they have to say, roll up their sleeves, and make an impact. Everybody wants to, but I think that's the way that you get people to come back to those meetings. So I think at this point, what I would have done is to have you review the quote changes. We don't have time for that, but I'm sorry, the change quotes. But look at them when you have a chance, because I think you'll find them to be enlightening. And either way, at this point, I think I'm going to hand the, oh yes, there is a paper here as well. You're welcome. I encourage you, if you're interested in some of what I talked about, a lot of it made its way into Becoming the New Boss, which is the book that is going to be published next month. Thank you, Seth and Wendy, for the opportunity just to share that. And this QR code, if you have a QR reader, it'll bring you directly to the website. You can find out a little bit more. You can enter your information, get a sample chapter, and also when more information comes out, you'll be on the front and center knowing all about it so that you can get it and, of course, pass it on to all of your friends and family. But I thank you. This is not about me. This is about you. You did a great job. And it's an honor to be able to engage with you tonight. And previously, I've learned a lot, and I really feel very inspired that that our conversation hopefully will lead to good places. So thank you all for the opportunity.
So how about another round of applause?